sizzling fried garlic and coriander wakes you up. You sleepily make your way to the kitchen and you find your Teta cooking your favorite dish, mlokhiyeh. How will you serve yourself? Rice first or toasted bread first? Do you add vinegar with onions or just a squeeze of lemon? We all have our favorite way of layering it. Some prefer it minced, others prefer the leaves whole. Whichever way, it tastes like home. Fadi Kattan loves the taste of home. He loves it so much that he has devoted his time to the kitchens of Palestine, celebrating the dishes we love, our local ingredients, and the producers who make them. But this chef and hotelier adds his own twist, modernizing Palestinian dishes. Whether at his restaurants, Akub in London and Louvre in Toronto, or through his new cookbook, Bethlehem, Chef Fadi keeps Palestinian food alive and evolving. This episode was recorded on the 19th of March, 2025.
على بلدي المحبوب وديني زاد واقي والبعد
يا طالعين عين الجبل يا مول المبيدين النار بين اليمن يمن عين الهنا يا روح.
I'm your host, Afaf Shawabibi, and you're listening to Tarwida. Ahla wa sahla, Fadi. Welcome to Tarwida. It's really good to have you with us.
It's a pleasure.
Fadi, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know a lot about you already, but we'd love to hear about your personal journey. Tell us about your family background, your upbringing.
So, and I come from a Bethlehem family on both sides of my parents. My father's family were in textile. My grandfather and my grandmother went to Kobe in Japan, stayed in Kobe until 43, where they then ran away because the Americans bombed Japan, ended up in India. My dad was born in India, and then they came back to Palestine. On my mother's side, my grandfather was born in Bethlehem but raised in Paris, came back as a young man before finishing school, finished school here, ended up studying medicine in Beirut and stayed. So my parents both came from those two very rich journeys, while my two grandmothers were sisters. My journey started in my grandmother's kitchen. My journey still happens in my mother's kitchen every day. And even when she's traveling, I call her and I'm like, so what are we cooking today? What is your recipe for this or that? Like, and this is the beauty of transmission of food. It's alive, it's daily, it's really something that thrives. The richness about Palestine.
So any memories that you can share with us?
Actually, before my Teta, my first memory that I was told about, which I don't recollect, but with those memories, when you're told a memory, you construct it in your imagination.
Yeah.
It's in my mother's kitchen. Apparently, my mother was feeding me cereal, and one of her aunts brings her some sfiha. So she takes a bit of the meat in the sfiha, feeds it to me, and then after that tries to give me a spoon of cereal again, and apparently I spit it out quite graphically. So I think that palate was trained very young with the flavors of tahni. Sfiha has meat and tahni and pineapple. Like everything a doctor tells you don't feed a child is in sfiha.
You were a baby or you were a child?
I was 6 months old.
Oh, wow. Okay, so like a baby.
Yeah. So like that kind of thing is the memories. My memory of my grandmother's kitchen really starts with breakfast. My grandmother frying eggs in ghee, in samna, and generously sprinkling them with sumac. So it's like become a staple of my cooking journey. It's all the time we have that fried eggs in ghee with sumac.
Which, by the way, for many years we were like, samne, it's so unhealthy. But then like in the last few years, it's been said to be like super healthy.
It's like with chefs, when I hear people talk about nose to tail.
Mm.
It's like, Habibi, nose to tail, my grandmother used to do. Like everybody.
What does that mean, nose to
So
tail?
using the whole animal.
Okay.
Using the whole animal. Like all of our grandmothers anywhere in the world, if they were in a city, they'd go to a butcher. If they were in a village, they would very often have their own animals. And when you slaughter an animal, you eat the whole animal. You don't eat bits and parts. It's become trendy in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
When people tell you, oh, but we're making our own broth in restaurants as if it's something that's like exceptional.
Yeah.
It's like, but everybody's been doing broth for like 5,000 years.
Right. So, was there a defining moment that made you realize that you wanted to dedicate your career to Palestinian cuisine?
So, and I always wanted to cook growing up. I got to finishing my high school, told my parents I want to become a chef. They didn't really think it was a great idea. So we made a deal. I did my first degree in business, and then I did my second degree in hospitality and food. So that was the, negotiated deal. So everybody was happy. In reality, what really pushed me to Palestinian food specifically was doing my second degree in France and realizing how there's this system of protecting origin of produce, the AOC, Appellation d'origine contrôlée in France, where if you're making brie, you're only allowed to make brie cheese in Normandy. And if you're making champagne, you're only allowed to make it within a diameter around Reims in Champagne. And I was seeing our kitchen not being represented, being stolen and appropriated.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, like we need to do something about this. And of course, the challenge was how do you take most of our food is communal? How do you take this into a restaurant setting? And then I came back to Palestine, worked for practically a year in a hotel. The second intifada happened, the hotel closed down, and I joined my family business, which is importing and selling professional kitchens.
Okay.
So at the end of the second intifada, I organized the first Palestinian cooking competition, and I was quite stunned by most of the chefs competing because what they were cooking was non-Palestinian.
Okay, yeah, because that's what they were aspiring to, or
Exactly.
Mm.
And that pushed me even more into, okay, when I go back to cooking, what I need to represent is Palestinian food.
Mm.
What I need to work with is Palestinian produce. So 10 years ago, I opened Fawda, Bethlehem, the first gastronomic restaurant in Palestine. And I started sourcing my produce in the market from the farmers and cooking very Palestinian.
Okay, okay. And then a few years later, you ended up doing a YouTube series called Tatas Kitchen.
Yeah, I still have a lot of fond memories of Teta's Kitchen. Teta's Kitchen was at the end of COVID. So COVID happened. I closed down my restaurant here and closed down the guest house I was running. Got very bored a day after lockdown. So I launched a podcast called Sabah Al Yasmin on Radio Al Hara that had also just appeared at the time. I realized you guys do a very difficult job because I actually did an episode every day.
Oh, wow. That's
So I did
insane.
77 episodes with no prior knowledge of doing a podcast. So I was recording on voice notes on WhatsApp, interviewing people with a bad internet. Like, I mean, if you
Oh
listen
my
to them, they're still out
God.
there. If you listen to them, like the quality is the worst of the worst of the worst.
I have heard some of them, and actually, quality aside, it's actually really interesting to listen to. I mean,
Thank you.
ramblings of
It
a
was
chef
fun.
or something. I heard.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Then the project came up with PIPD to do Tatas Kitchen, and that was really fun. I was lucky to work with a small team, and we traveled across Palestine, where I cooked with a grandmother in every city. Some cities I couldn't physically go to, so we
Ah.
cooked remotely. I was in my kitchen, the grandmother was in her kitchen. That's the case for Gaza, that's the case for Yafa, that's the case for Al Faham.
Mm.
And then the last episode was dedication to my grandmother's memory. So I revisited my grandmother's home that I hadn't been in for years since she passed away. Because I think it's important that we acknowledge where our food comes from, where the transmission of food is, where we learn those, those beautiful recipes that are rasha, a pinch, and
Mm.
kamsha, a handful. Like, this is the beauty of that cuisine.
Yes, yes, for sure. And so I like your way of explaining Palestinian food in terms of the territories, the terroir that you call it. Can you please tell us about the three terroirs of Palestine?
I mean, I simplify it by saying three terroirs. In reality, there's so many more, but I look at commonalities within those terroirs. And to make it easy, there's the coastal part of Palestine. There is the center, which is the olives, the almonds landscape. And then you have the desert. And the desert with the nomadic people, the Bedouins. Hala, terroir, we are using a term that originally comes from the wine world, but
Mm.
terroir englobes not only the land,
Yeah.
it's also the knowledge of the people on the land. 30 years ago, when you talked about a terroir, we were more focusing on the inclination of the slope of the land, the exposure to the sun, etc. And with time, the concept of terroir evolved to be able to include more the people, more the savoir-faire, more the traditions. And I think in Palestine, we have a very particular case because of occupation. Our people have moved around, were displaced. So, something that intrigues me a lot is how did a group of people manage to preserve a food inspired by their terroir while they were displaced? So, if we take the case of Jaffa or Akka or Haifa, people there were displaced in 48, ended up inland. So either the West Bank or in Jordan, a bit in Lebanon where they had access to the sea, but quite limited. How do you preserve the wedding songs around food that talk about the sea, but you're actually 60 kilometers away from the sea and you no more have the right to go back to your land? Like, and that's interesting to see how things moved like this.
And so, like, can you give an example of certain dishes or some evolution that happened because of the occupation and inaccessibility of produce? For example, sayadiyat samak, which is the fish and rice dish. If there's no access to fish, then how does that work?
Well, first, there's no access to fish. Then, when people moved inland and they were displaced, inland you had no access to the sea, but you did have access to dried fish.
Mm,
So all of a sudden, we saw people sometimes doing sayadiyya with bacalao, which
okay.
is
Yeah.
dried cod. The best example, I think, is when you look at the namings of certain things and how those have been preserved across the world in spite of our displacements. I'll give you an example. How do you call the little wheat grains that are hand rolled? Maftul.
Hmm.
But in Bethlehem, and I still haven't found the origin of the etymology, we call them marmaon. Now, who calls them marmaon until now? People in Bethlehem and every Palestinian in Chile,
Ah.
because the community in Chile mainly is originally from Bejala and Bethlehem.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So you tell a Palestinian Chilean maftul, they don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Um, so many Palestinian dishes vary by region and even by family. How do you decide which versions of a dish to showcase in your work?
So when I cook, whether it's at Akub in London or at Loof in Toronto, or when I do pop-ups, I cook my own version. But when I write recipes, like for my book, I would usually tell the story of or the recipe that is my family's.
Mm,
Let's start at the base. There is nothing called seven spices. It
yeah.
doesn't exist. Seven spices is a mix of spices that's done by every single family differently. How much allspice? Do you put cloves or you don't put cloves? Do you put ginger or not? Is it cardamom heavy or not? Is it cinnamon more? And that's the beauty of this diversity.
Mm,
When I do cook a dish that is specific to a certain region, I acknowledge where it comes from. So I have no claim saying fattat lahma or fattat djaj is mine. It's not. My discovery of feta as an alternative to mansaf was from my family in Gaza, where in Gaza they don't cook mansaf. The equivalent of mansaf is the feta with the bread at the bottom, the rice, the chicken or lamb, and then the with the shatta on top. I have an aunt who's from Gaza. That's how I discovered this. I enjoy doing desserts with dates filled with almonds and a clove syrup. That is Gaza. That is not Bethlehem. We don't have date trees.
Yeah.
So I think part of the process is acknowledging where things come from.
Mm-mm. That's really nice. Just to finish off about Teta's Kitchen, did the series help you or change anything in your development as a chef or in your work?
Oh, definitely. It was a very humbling experience. So it had been a few years I had lost my grandmother. And, Palestinian grandmothers have a very special way of telling you off. So I loved being told off in all these kitchens by all these grandmothers from Al Khalil to Taiba to Nablus to Sebastia. No, I think what I learned a lot in Tatas Kitchen was when we started releasing the episodes and people started reaching out from the diaspora, I was finally able to put words on a lot of feelings I had on how food links people.
Yeah.
When people started reaching out with, oh, but I'm originally from Sebastia, but I've never been allowed to visit Sebastia. I'm originally from Nablus, or people reaching out and saying, look, I know this dish, we cook it in our family, but we cook it differently, and then listening to them. And that went really across the globe. And it was very interesting to see how, yeah, one of our strongest elements of unity is our food.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You've said that everyone has to be a food activist. I've heard you say that once. What does that mean?
Food is in a very bad place right now. Food is, in general, in the world, food is in a bad place. We waste food. We have people that have no food security across the globe.
Mm.
Some of them as a man-made disaster, like in Gaza right now. Some of them because of natural disasters. So we all have a responsibility towards food. We need to buy produce that are local. We need to manage the waste we create when we cook. And then, as Palestinians, if you're dealing with somebody who doesn't know much about Palestine, the best way to tell them about Palestine is food.
Yeah.
Invite them around a table. Cook Palestinian. Tell the story of the Jaffa oranges through that table. Tell the story of displacement, of occupation through using za'atar. Since 1977, the Israeli authorities have forbade us of picking wild za'atar in our own mountains.
Yeah.
It takes a herb to tell a story
Yeah.
because that is something people can relate to. So, yes, I think everybody has to be a food activist. Also, whatever cuisine you're eating, acknowledge and recognize its origin. So, I don't believe there's something called Levantine cuisine. I think it's a bullshit word. It's a colonial word that means nothing. It's
Why?
Palestinian food. Because first, Levantine is a French word that comes from Le Levant, where the sun used to rise. So it's everything that's east of Rome. The world is pretty big east of Rome. But the other thing is, words like Middle Eastern, Levantine, and Mediterranean today are used a lot by Israeli chefs that are appropriating our cuisine. And it disguises the origin. If you've had the chance to eat food made by a chef from Aleppo and a chef from Beirut and a chef from Jerusalem or Bethlehem and a chef from Gaza and a chef from Jordan and a chef from Cairo, we have such a rich variety of regional cuisines, of national cuisines. Yes, there are commonalities,
Mm.
but I can take a bet with you. Serve 4 different mulkhiyas done by 4 different people from those 4 countries, and they have nothing to do with each other except the fact that it's the same herb and it's a bit of a gloopy stew, but that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Again, I don't understand when people go buy a cheese or buy a wine, by fruit, and are very happy about its origin being celebrated. And then it comes to Palestinian products, and it's like, nothing is said.
Yeah.
Frika is Palestinian, whether we like it or not.
Would you agree that it's been said that the battle of Tatriz has ended in our favor, and now it's the battle for food? I mean, I know that we don't need to be living in a state where it's like always defensive and fighting for identity, but because of the appropriation you're talking about, there is a battle that's happening.
Did the Battle of Tatriz end in our favor? I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think the Battle of Tatriz is ongoing, like every battle, because today we are still facing an erasure program
Yeah.
of a colonizer. Yes, we may have small victories here and there. And I agree with you. We shouldn't be in a state of battle. We should be in a state of being loud about the beauty of our culture. I don't cook hummus because I'm answering an Israeli chef who stole hummus.
Yeah.
I cook hummus because it's a fantastic dish. I don't, imagine how sad and horrible it would be if I wake up in the morning and start thinking, okay, so they've stolen this and this and this, I'm going to cook this and this and that. No, I want people to come and enjoy their food at a restaurant. I want people to buy my book and enjoy cooking it. I tell people who I'm lucky to meet when they're getting the book, I say, I'm going to come back and check in a year. I want to see finger marks of olive oil and tahini on the book. Like, it has to be beautiful. It has to be fun. I know it sounds totally crazy to be saying this right now as a genocide is ongoing.
Yeah.
But we actually owe it to everybody who's been silenced, who's disappeared. The attack on Palestinian heritage has been ongoing.
Yeah.
Should we forget that 76 years ago, Palestinian home libraries were stolen? Should we forget that the Rashad al-Shawa Center was bombed a year and a half ago in Gaza? No, we shouldn't forget. Should we judge people for wherever they are, whether they're Palestinians that stayed in historic Palestine in 48 in what is Israel today, or people who are in the West Bank or in the diaspora for our diversities? No. But we should together all document, archive, and celebrate, because food is alive. Our food is alive. And I think that's the battle we won, whether it's with Tatriz. Tatriz hasn't become a museum object only. It's alive. Food hasn't become something a bunch of historians write about. It's alive. Dabka is something that is danced. Our music is there. Our photography is there. I'm lucky to work with young Palestinian photographers when I do a book, and I'm blessed with it. So that is, I think, the strength of any people in the world is to stay alive.
So يمكن رح أسمن لك بدنك بهالسؤال. But what do you think of collaborations with Israeli chefs?
No, you're not upsetting me. When I think of collaborations with Israeli chefs, I think that the only way I can collaborate with somebody, it's when we're equal.
Yeah.
And as long as I'm occupied and there's an occupier, we're not equal. I think there are Israelis that have humanist stances that acknowledge our rights to exist within justice, because the key word is justice. Sadly, I haven't met Israeli chefs who do acknowledge us and our right of existence, a right of existence within the internationally approved legal framework for Palestine. I'm not asking for more. I'm asking for recognizing the UN resolutions starting by 194, the right of return of Palestinian refugees. And I haven't seen this. So for me, making peace around a plate of hummus is bullshit.
Yeah.
Food is political, whether people like it or not. It is political. How you eat wherever you are is political. It doesn't change across the world. Why should Palestine be an exception?
Yeah. So food today is, I mean, everyone is into food right now. I heard that Hanan Sayed, who's the author of Nomad Cuisine of Abu Dhabi, it's a cookbook, said that food today is what the internet was in, I don't know, I guess the 90s. And that gives us an opportunity, right? That's why you having, the restaurants that you have and the cookbook are actually really important. Maybe you're not doing it strategically, but it is such a great vehicle for us to preserve and promote our culture and identity. So let's move now to your restaurants, Akub, which is in London, and Louf, which is in Toronto. Tell us about the names.
So the two are different in how they came to be. So the Akub, a few years ago, Rasha Khouri, who's a Palestinian based in London, reached out and said, "What do you think of London? Yalla, let's do something." And we started that journey that's been going on for 3 years now. When we chose the name Akub, we had a bunch of different names, and Akub is a beautiful plant. It's called Gundelia in Latin. It's a thistle that grows across Palestine, and very short season. You pick it and you have to clean the thorns, and it's quite hard work. And to cook it, it's an extremely delicate flavor between artichoke and
Mm,
asparagus somehow. And they're pan fried, deep fried, and cooked with laban or cooked with tahiniya. And a few years ago, the Israeli authorities forbade Palestinians from picking
yeah,
akub.
yeah.
And that decision was challenged in their high court. And finally, it was retracted to allow Palestinians to pick, I think it's 5 kilos per family, which, if you've ever cleaned akub, 5 kilos of akub, when you clean them, is like 800 grams. So akub was the one Russia and I chose because like it symbolized Palestine a lot.
Mm, mm,
Now, Louf in Toronto was Nicole Mankinen, who's my business partner in Canada, reached out. We started talking about Palestinian recipes. She herself is Canadian, her family is Palestinian. And I went off to see Toronto because in Toronto there are no Palestinian restaurants with a modern approach. There are Palestinian restaurants that are doing traditional hummus, falafel, mezzes. So that's how we started. And then the Louvre came about because, as you imagine, I'm quite obsessed with herbs and that are native to Palestine. And Louf in Latin is called Arum Palestinum. So it is one of the few plants that have Palestine in their Latin name of origin. And it's all of those names come from really wanting to tell the world about the seasons of Palestine. It's not 4 seasons. It's the season of this or that.
right.
موسم العكوب وموسم المشمش وموسم. That is the beauty of the rhythm of our food, our land.
Have you gone foraging?
Of course, I grew up foraging.
What's it like?
Picking huerna in Jericho with my late grandparents is maybe one of the most beautiful memories I have.
Mm,
Picking wild za'atar in Bethlehem's hills, beautiful, but let's not romanticize foraging. It's hard work. There's a difference between, the nice little stroll we're gonna have in the mountain and pick
yeah.
up a few herbs and actually foraging. Some of the farmers and foragers I work with, in Arabic we say yisrah.
Mm, like
So
wonder.
exactly. So they wander across the different spaces to pick those herbs. And that's a few very long days of picking until you get a bunch of wild za'atar. Or it's not the foraging where, you sit down and have a coffee and then walk around, enjoy the view. No,
Yeah,
it's hard
it's
work.
hard work.
But it's magic. The moment you get a few leaves of wild za'atar between your hands and you just rub them and smell the za'atar, like that is irreplaceable.
That's so nice. So let's talk about Akub. Just last night, one of our team members was there, and she said it was delicious.
Thank you.
And my niece said that everyone important in Palestine ends up at Akub. It's beautiful inside, and everyone wants to be there. So tell me, why is Akub such a success?
I think because we were lucky when we were thinking Akub and to really imagine, what do we want to say? What is it we're saying? What is the space that can tell a story? And when Rasha found the location and called me, we both were very excited at the fact that it's actually a Notting Hill home. And that sense of home
Yeah.
that's there, but a very nicely designed home. The designer that worked on it did a great job. I think we were very micromanaging both of us, the details, but the ceramics come from Jaffa, from a Palestinian ceramic maker.
Right.
The
Yeah.
wine list is growing and growing, representing more and more Palestinian winemakers. I think the secret of why people like it, it's because we care. The team cares.
Mm.
We go on training and telling stories of the produce, of the producers. Most of the Palestinian producers we work with have come to Akub. They've trained the team. They've talked to the team. So the beauty of it is we have, I think, 17 different nationalities on the team, and they all cook and serve Palestinian food and drink, which is also very much reflective of what London is. And I think that's great. I think it matters a lot who you work with
Mm.
and how you tell the story. And then also, we are in a craft that's a very traumatized craft historically, the restaurants and kitchens. And that's something we every day strive to change also, to create an inclusive, respectful space.
Right, right. Because the stereotype is that it's very stressful, it's very harsh. Beyond
Yeah.
that, I mean, you know way more than me, obviously.
Yeah.
So you're very grounded in the, for lack of a better term, classic techniques of cooking and Palestinian traditional recipes, but you then chose to start innovating and or deconstructing, I don't know how you would describe it, the cuisine. And I'm sure that you've received criticism about that. How do you balance preserving traditional recipes with innovating and modernizing Palestinian cuisine?
At the end of the day, I cook my own interpretation of Palestinian flavors. I don't do it for the sake of modernizing,
Right.
neither do I do it for the sake of preserving.
Okay.
It's how I perceive the flavors, the produce that can tell part of the story I want to share with you. Hala, I don't go all the way with modernized. I don't think molecular cuisine is
Yeah.
something I would ever want to dabble in.
Thank God.
I
Sorry.
it's no, I agree with you. I have the same position. It's not food anymore.
Yeah.
If I'm going to use a bunch of chemicals, whether they're natural or not, to create a floating sphere of something or I don't know what, it's not cooking anymore.
Mm.
Cooking has to be carnal, it has to be tactile, it has to be smells and scents and texture. I want you, when you eat a shish barak, whether it's cooked in laban jamid or whether, like I do them, roasted with a different filling, I want you to still have that crunch of the shish barak,
Mm.
but feel that warmth that is food. When you're having a mutabbal, whether it's red lentils like in Akub or green fava like in Loof, I want you to still ghamsi with the bread, your mutabbal. Like there are those things where food for me is that really in the present kind of food. How do I balance it? I don't.
You don't.
When I write a recipe or when I imagine a menu, like now I'm writing a menu for a pop-up and you'll have muhallabiya with dates that are smoked with frankincense.
Mm.
That's not very traditional. But you'll also have salated silik, Swiss chard chopped, sauteed with olive oil, garlic, sumac, and lemon juice. That's very traditional.
Yeah.
It's more a journey of the flavors, the terroirs. When I call my mother and ask her for a recipe, so her first question is, "Oh, you want me to cook it for you?" And then the second question is, do you really want to deconstruct that one? I'm like, no, no,
It's
no,
like
no,
she
no,
knows
no,
what
no,
you're.
no, no. Yeah, and I'm like, no, 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 but I'm not going to I just need to understand the recipe because maybe I'll actually be just replicating your recipe.
But then when you imagine, you said you imagine, when does that usually happen? Like you say you don't sit down, but is it like as you're working? Is it in your sleep? Is it when you're walking?
Okay, I've woken up at 4 in the morning to go reduce dibis, so the grape molasses.
Yeah.
I literally woke up at 4 in the morning a few years ago, put up some dibis in a pot and started reducing it and reducing it and reducing it over heat until I got that consistency that I had imagined. And this was at the time where I was cooking in Fauda. Like I imagined it on a dish.
Mm.
I also sometimes am cooking something and then something happens and I'm like, oh, but I could use this product to do something else. And I start imagining this something else. Sometimes it's reading a book and based on a smell described, based on a flavor described, where I start thinking of this. Sometimes it's actually being in a restaurant and whether in Akub or Louf or Fauda and seeing people eat a dish and then be like, okay, that is something they like or that's something they don't like.
Mm.
How do I interpret it differently? What do I change here or there? When I write a menu, I try thinking also of how to tell the story of journeys. How do I tell those three terroirs we talked about earlier in a menu?
And then there's also the availability of the produce in where you are in London or in Toronto. So is it like you're walking through the market there or you're or aware of what's in season and what's not, and then that informs the menu?
If I'm not physically there, I look at the produce lists online 3 times a day
Mm,
for
mm,
the next 3 months. We're lucky to work with small, medium sized farmers and growers where you get a list of what's there right now in season, what's end of season, and what's coming based on what's planted. And based on that, I think of what happens. I'll share a story with you in Louvre. We had finalized the menu 3 days before opening. We were more or less set on everything except the garnishes. And this gentleman comes in. He works with small growers across Ontario, and he brings me a box with 70 different herbs. The team were exhausted. It was late at night. Everybody was ready to go home, so we had a early start next morning. The restaurant didn't have its furniture in yet. It had its kitchen, but the actual tables were not there. So I pull out 2 stainless steel tables from the kitchen, put them in the middle of the dining room, put out the 70 different herbs, and keep the management team, and we taste every one of those 70 herbs.
mm.
And you could see the team was tired. It took them a minute to all like revive and like, chef, that olive plant can go on this salad. That bronze fennel is going to go in this cocktail. That is going to go there. And that's the beauty of food. Sometimes you create with others. I'm not the kind of chef who will write a recipe and send it to somebody in the team and be like, that's what we're doing. I actually work with the team in London, in Toronto, and even when I'm invited for a pop up or for an event, I usually call the chef and have a chat with the chef that's running the kitchen where I'm invited, and we go through things together because of the availability of produce, but also because of respecting the local terroir.
When I assume it's usually the older generation who would typically resist the variations or the innovations that you come up with. Like, what do you say to them? How do you answer to their criticism?
Yes, you're right. Very often it's the older generation that sits down, has a meal, and are not happy with what I do with Mansaf or what I do with Msakhan or and I listen to their feedback, their criticism, their comments, as long as they're not nasty comments. So I listen to those people. I learn a lot from them. And at the same time, I do remind them that I am not trying to replicate
Yeah.
what is cooked at home. Because if you look at my mansaf in Akub, it's little bowls
Mm.
of laban jamid, lamb, and rice wrapped with bread and deep fried and served in laban jamid. Of course, if you look at that and you imagine a big mansaf on a tray, it's not at all the same thing. Now, if you take the time to think, mansaf is usually eaten by hand. You make a ball of mansaf and then you throw it into your mouth without your fingers touching your lips because you're going to use those same fingers again to eat. So that's where creating that ball of mansaf comes from.
Mm-mm.
It's not so strange.
Yeah.
With our food, I think partially because of that threat of erasure,
Mm. Mm.
because of the diasporic dimension of our people, whether people who left before 48 or people who are expelled in 48 and 67, and sadly today people being expelled, there's also a bit of that mechanism of wanting to preserve something.
Mm. Mm.
I think it comes down to respect.
Mm. Mm.
I've heard people use the words elevate, and it pisses me off. I don't elevate Palestinian food. I cook my version of Palestinian food.
Mm. Mm.
There's nothing that's better or less good.
Right. Okay, so let's move on to your cookbook, which was
Mhm.
named one of the top cookbooks of the year by the LA Times. Congratulations.
Thank
Bethlehem.
you.
What makes the book so special?
Honestly, I tell the story without targeting it for an audience. So the book started years ago where in Fauda in Bethlehem, guests would ask me, but where'd you get your produce from? And I'd be like, oh, if you're staying with us, join me tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. We're going to go across the market together and you can join me and meet the people. Because, chefs have this like humongous ego, but in reality, we have to acknowledge that a lot of it comes from the producers, the farmers, the foragers, the artisans. We assemble things. We put things together. We apply a bit of heat or a bit of cold. We chop things, but that's what we do. We design a flavor, but in reality, it's all these people. And it started there from wanting to take people by the hand around Bethlehem and tell them the story of the food. Have them meet Nabil, who sells the herbs, and have them meet the Nacha brothers, and have them meet Khaled, who bakes the kidras. And at the same time, very often when I would tell my own story, people wouldn't understand. But what are those Palestinians that are diverse, that are cosmopolitan, that have had, people, when I tell people my dad was born in India and my grandparents used to live in Japan in the 20s and 30s, people look at me like, wow, that's so impressive. I'm like, no, it's not impressive. There was like this enormous community of people who were working in commerce, living in Kobe, from Armenians to Greeks to Syrians to, the largest textile producer in Kobe at the time was a Syrian family. Like, it's not an exception. We're not. And so I also wanted to tell those stories of if I cook the way I cook today, it's thanks to my grandparents. It's thanks to my parents every day. It's, my dad challenging me because he doesn't like malfouf and I love malfouf, and who gets to convince my mother more to do malfouf or not at home? It's,
Yeah.
like right now, I think on every event menu I'm writing, I am using the spices of basturma. And it's because my mother hates basturma. My dad loves basturma. And as a kid, I remember like my dad smuggling basturma into the fridge. And
Because it has
I
such a
acquired
strong
that.
smell.
Yeah, because the fenugreek in the shaman, the fenugreek is very powerful. But it's a taste that I grew up with.
Mhm.
And I love it. And I try recreating it in different settings. But that is, I think, where it all comes down to all those stories that I want to tell through the book. I'm not preserving Palestinian cuisine. I'm telling stories of food that's alive.
Yeah. So I heard that you gave a copy to some of the suppliers, like the chairs and whatnot. What was their reaction when they got the book?
When I went to the Dead Sea and gave it to Athman Hala, the fabulous gentleman who managed to preserve the Palestinian presence on the shores of the Dead Sea, yeah, when I think of that day, I all of my emotions move profoundly because he teared up and said thank you. And I was like, no, 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 no. You're not allowed to say thank you. I thank you. I thank you for doing everything you've been doing since 1967. I thank you for preserving Palestinian salt making. Actually, I thank you for doing what I think is the best sea salt in the world.
Which you use in your restaurant, right?
I use it everywhere. I
Yeah.
carry it in my suitcase when I travel. I think if you go deep in my pockets, there'll be like grains of salt in both my pockets. Like I love that salt, and it hit me so hard that this man who's been doing him and his son Hussam and their team are working in very, very, very difficult conditions under occupation, and they're doing a product that is magnificent.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something very important, which is that honesty of working with those people. It's symbiotic. It's really like this. So let's just go back to Nabil and the butchers. When I opened Fauda 10 years ago, I remember one of the first press articles that was written about us was in Libération, the French newspaper. And they sent a photographer, and I asked the photographer, would we be allowed to get a copy of the portraits of the different people you would meet in the market with me? Because I'd like to print them out, frame them, and offer it to them.
Mm.
And giving them the copy of the book was the same feeling of me very, very sincerely thanking them from my heart for what they do, because they do beautiful stuff.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We're in a difficult time right now. This week, the so-called ceasefire was basically a lot of bombings, a lot of people have died, and the borders have been closed in Gaza. There's no aid coming in or out, and just like with this podcast, where we said, okay, genocide is happening. What are we doing talking about arts and culture? But then we realized that we need to keep living, we need to keep talking, we need to, regardless of what's happening. How does the situation affect your work?
It's not easy.
Mm.
I won't lie to you. It's not easy. There's profound, profound moments of doubt, of questioning, of I'm cooking while people are being starved. I'm telling people celebrate Palestinian identity while whole families are being murdered. But I think just like the podcast, just like any other expression of who we are, what we are, it's very important right now because khalas, this dehumanizing of Palestinians, and I don't say we need to humanize ourselves. We are human whether people like it or not. I don't ask for legitimacy of people. Like when I feel that somebody is not very happy that I'm Palestinian, I'm like, but what do you want me to be? Like, tell me what you want me to be.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, I am Palestinian. I was born in Bethlehem to one of the oldest Christian families in the world. So what do you want me to say? Do you want me to say I am this or that to suit your freaking narrative? No, I
Right,
won't.
right.
I am what I am. And I will celebrate the fact that Palestinians planted grapes in Jericho 9,500 years before Christ. And I will celebrate that Palestinians celebrate Ramadan together because that is Palestine that I stand up for. It's the Palestine of all of us. But it's very challenging right now when the ceasefire the ceasefire was breached is a big word because the ceasefire was never really respected.
Right.
But let's say when the massive bombings happened, I could hear the planes flying over Bethlehem during the night. And imagine the total schizophrenia of I'm writing a menu for an event that's happening in a few days' time. And I hear those planes, and my questioning in my head is, where are they bombing?
Mm. Yeah.
Is it Gaza? Is it the West Bank? Is it Syria? Is it Lebanon? Is it... But there's one thing which keeps us all going, and it's not as a reaction to erasure. It's actually the profound love of life that we have. And that is important. I don't cook today more because I'm seeing more of the savage face of darkness that is occupation. I cook more because I believe, and I'm lucky and privileged to do what I do. And I believe that when I have a chance to be able to do a fundraiser here or there for Gaza or for the West Bank or for humanitarian aid, I will do it. Just like I've also cooked in Geneva for people who are from fragile backgrounds in Geneva. And, you know, I don't believe in the misery food trade. I don't want you to come and eat at Akub or Louf because I'm Palestinian. I don't want you to buy my cookbook because I'm Palestinian. I want you to buy my cookbook because it's a beautiful cookbook that I was lucky to have fantastic people from Noor Frehan do the cover, to Lias Halabi and Ashley Lima do fantastic pictures, and a publisher that did a great job and, you know, made a book that I am proud of. I want you to come to Akub because Rasha and I started this journey of getting Palestinian food and wines and drinks and maftoor and to London. I want you to come to Louvre because Nicole and I did the same thing. I want you to come to Casa in Bethlehem. That's a boutique hotel I set up with Elizabeth Cassis, who's Palestinian, from Chile 6 years ago. I want you to read what I write about Palestinian food and wine because you're interested, not because, oh, haram, the poor Palestinians.
Yeah.
I don't believe in sumud. And I know it pisses people off. Actually, I have some of my texts in a compilation done by the Markaz Review called Sumud. And people are like, wait, how don't you believe in Sumud? Of course Palestinians are resilient.
Yeah.
Of course they're here. They're still here. But that's not what they aspire to. They actually aspire, if you ask anybody in Gaza and Nazareth or in Jerusalem or in Nablus, what do you want? They want to live as equal human beings in justice. They want to be acknowledged. They want to be recognized as human beings. And that's where we need to go on. You doing your art, me doing my craft, you know, all of that.
That's a great note to end on for our listeners. Fadi, thank you so much for
Thank you, Afa.
your knowledge, your time, your experience, and I can't wait to get my copy of Bethlehem. I'm going to be getting it in a couple of days, so I will show it to you when we meet face to face with all the grease stains on it.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you so
time.
much, Afa.
And good luck
Thank
with the
you.
rest of your trip, and I look forward to coming to your restaurant.
In Athens or in London or in Bethlehem.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Okay.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Tarwida, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the best of Palestinian arts and culture. For more information, please follow us on social media and don't forget to subscribe. Salam.